family.
It's Latin for many.
Tick.
Now suck your blood. Now suck
Politics.
your blood.
It's happening. It's happening. It's happened. It happened this morning, Gonzo. It's crazy. Oh no, Wired, get your pop-up out of my face. Oh no, we might need to get an archived version. Do you have it?
Yeah.
Why don't you start reading?
Okay, here we go.
This came out this morning. The decision happened this morning. This is breaking news, big news.
Breaking from Wired.com. Roe stood for 49 years. It revolutionized life for women. Wow. It's like a...
Wow. And yet...
yeah. The Supreme Court today overturned the legal right to abortion in the United States.
No, they didn't.
No, they did. I was going to say. Wow.
No, they didn't.
First
but
sentence.
It's continuing to be presented this way, and that is explicitly not what Roe v. Wade is. But they love talking about it that way.
Are we in an election year or something? I don't know.
Oh, it's almost as if.
Returning the ability to regulate the procedure to the states, more than half of which have promised to ban it. The decision in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization explicitly overturns the landmark 1973 case Roe v. Wade, which guaranteed the right to abortion prior to fetal viability across the country. Quote, held the Constitution...
Look at that. How often do you see that little detail actually... included prior to fetal viability?
Yeah,
almost never is that detail included in stories.
Yeah. Quote, held, the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. Roe and Casey are overruled, and the authority to regulate abortion is returned to the people and their elected representatives. Justice Samuel Alito wrote for a majority. The decision was 6-3 with the court's 3 liberal justices in dissent. The decision, which will launch the advent of trigger laws in 13 states, had been anticipated since a draft version was leaked in May. As it takes effect, it promises to roll back 50 years of profound changes in lives of women in the United States and in the structures and well-being of families created by Roe. Oh, Roe. Oh, whoa, Roe.
Woe is Roe would have been a great title to this episode.
That is true. You're right. But Lambda AI, it's a child. Got to take care of it.
Yeah.
Since the early 1970s, you want me to keep going?
I don't think we need to read the whole thing. Again, there's so many details that we have gone over about what Roe actually is. Of course, as we know, it's sort of almost ubiquitously described as the right to abortion.
Yeah.
And it's just not the most precise way to explain it. Abortion is included in there, but the actual ruling of Roe v. Wade was specifically the ruling for the right to privacy with your doctor, and the government cannot, get involved with stuff that you are doing with your doctor in certain instances. It did happen to be ruled in the context of an abortion case, and so it's mainly what it's talked about.
Yeah,
right. Now again. This is this was not a law, by the way. This was never a law. And that's what just bugs me to no end when you hear people talking about it, because they don't realize that it is not a law. It was simply a court decision to set precedent. And precedences change, and that's what's happened here, is the precedent has changed. But it was never a law. In fact, the Democrats have done a wonderful job of promising for decades that if you vote for the Democrats, they will codify Roe v. Wade. And they've had, 50 years, I would say about half of which they've been in control to actually codify and turn Roe v. Wade into a law, which would have made it it would have made it more difficult to reverse, seeing as how all it would have ever taken was the Supreme Court to say, we changed our mind. Whereas if it was actually voted into law, then to change it, you would have had to go through Congress. It would have been a whole thing. But Democrats have used it as basically they've held Democrats hostage for 50 years. They've held women hostage. They've held social justice-y men hostage. They've held everybody hostage, promising to codify it into law for 50 years. And they just never did. Why? Not because they actually wanted to do it, but because if they did codify it, then they wouldn't be able to hold it over Democrats' heads during the next election. This was a weapon used by the Democrats to coerce, basically, people into voting, especially single issue voters, single issue Democrat voters specifically, who, made this their thing, and they voted on that in every single election. And the Democrats, as a party, could have made this a law half a dozen times over at least, but they didn't, because they don't actually care. They just wanted to use it as a political tool.
Right. They'd rather have it as the political weaponry, and they've rolled it out here as
which is what they're doing now.
It's a big cannon. It's a huge.
They're doing it exactly now. They did the same thing during Gavin Newsom's recall election.
I was going to bring that up.
During the recall,
and it worked.
They suddenly, out of nowhere, Texas was able to roll back their abortion laws, which was used very effectively to make sure Gavin Newsom, Democrats came out and voted to keep some slimy lizard man as their governor, even though they hate him for all the other reasons. I'm not going to get into it. I was in California recently at a big event, and this was not a conservative event. This was just a mainstream regular event. But the people on stage, and there must have been 10,000 people here. That's an exaggeration. A couple thousand people. The people on stage, total liberal people, talking about how much they don't like Gavin Newsom. I'm like, wow, they really don't like this guy here. For a state that re-voted him in, they really don't like him. And it was all because of this Roe v. Wade issue. And we said it when it was first leaked from the Supreme Court that this is a weapon the Democrats are using to try to gain advantage in the midterms. And that's exactly what's happening here. Now, because it's not a law, nothing really changes. The states get to decide what they want to do. And, if a democratic republic worked as intended, that would reflect the desires of the people in that place. It doesn't always work that way, but that's the idea. Now, this has a lot of talk right now about trigger laws, something called trigger laws. This was sent in here just as an example. This is from AP News. Headline, Missouri bans most abortions after U.S. Supreme Court ruling. This happened just immediately. A Missouri law outlawing most abortions took effect Friday as Republican state officials acted quickly to enforce a ban following a U.S. Supreme Court decision ending constitutional protections for abortions. A 2019 Missouri law prohibits abortions except in cases of medical emergency, but that law contained a provision making it effective only upon notification by the Attorney General, Governor, or Legislature that the U.S. Supreme Court had overruled Roe v. Wade, et cetera, et cetera. So there are these laws that exist that are just sitting there but don't take effect until Roe v. Wade is overturned. And Missouri did this in 2019. A lot of these trigger laws have just been sitting there dormant for many years. There is a list of them over here on the New York Times, where there are, I believe, 13 states that have trigger laws that are expected to go into effect as of today. Now, some of these come into effect immediately. Some of them have a 30-day waiting period from today, but these are the states making that decision. Arkansas, Idaho, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming. That is 13 states, and then they kind of just
13, huh?
Interesting,
Same
isn't it?
number as the beginning of the country.
Like the 13 colonies, you mean? Yeah, so there you go. It is a big day, sort of a historic morning. Now, the fact that it does leave it up to the states, of course, a ton of the states are just not going to change anything. They'll keep it exactly how they're doing it. But it'll be interesting because the federal protections have been lifted. Now, this idea of states' rights will come up again in the second part of the show, but it kind of goes in the other direction, and it'll be very entertaining to see what Democrats think about states' rights in that case. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts, Gons? Do you have some things for us? I think
I do regarding this topic. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It just feels like there's not much, and I'm sorry about feelings. I mean, this isn't
feels. Gons has feelings,
I have
folks.
Feelings.
Don't forget.
I don't see a problem with the states having a little more say in this regard.
It's how the system's supposed to work.
Yeah, and I completely understand the political usage of this. You know, you brought up all the points I would have brought up with using it with Newsom during the recall of his whole governorship last year. But it does seem like the final weapon for the Democrats. You know, they don't really have an issue beyond this topic that really gets voters out of their house to vote or whatever, you know, so this is really their last hurrah. And,
I mean, especially with the red wave going on
in
the midterms right now, and Biden and Kamala's low approval ratings. I mean, that's part of the thing here. It's like there's a lot of conservatives celebrating today, and I understand because there's a lot of conservatives who have fought for this for a very long time. But they need to know that just Roe v. Wade getting overturned doesn't necessarily change the state of abortion in most of the country.
You're just going to have people going to a different state to do it.
They're going to be doing it in a different state, and that's just on the sort of practical the level of, you know, the human life cost of it.
Right.
But I think that this is actually a secret weapon to the Democrats. You know, things are not looking good for them. And, you know, you may have gotten this, victory as a conservative, but what kind of ramification is this going to have on the next 6 years? I mean, it really is like this weird, like you said, a cannon, like a Yamato gun that is disguised as a victory.
With the way things have been accelerating, just in general, we try to stay as grounded as centered as possible. So everything was super left, right? And we watched it really just turn. I mean, it takes a long time to happen, but we watched it turn and then literally swing past the center and move right. And so it's fascinating to watch because, you're right. If you see all these people celebrating, you're celebrating on the premise of what the Democrats want you to think of this whole situation.
It very well could mean Democrats taking control of the House and or Senate, and it'll go a long way to get Biden or the Democrats reelected in 2024. It's unfortunate that is the way that it is, but that is the plan here. But it's at least this is something that the Republicans have been fighting for 50 years, and they finally got it. And you need to question the timing for sure, but I don't want to rain on everybody's parade immediately, but I get very nervous about what this means for the future.
And that's, and the proof for that is simply the woke, I don't know, leftist Hollywood culture, whatever you want to call it. These people are out in droves with their comments and thoughts. This is eonline.com. And the headline is Padma Lakshmi, Sophia Bush, and more stars react after Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade. I don't know why they led with Padma Lakshmi and Sophia Bush. I don't know who that is. I'm not quite sure. The photos show here Reese Witherspoon, Hillary Clinton, and I don't know who that guy is. But I'm not going to read the comments by these folks. But they get all the people out here Let's see. Allie and Jay, Mina Harris, Nicola Coughlin, Barack Obama.
Oh my gosh, that's the first name that I've recognized so far.
Barack Obama said, Today, the Supreme Court not only reversed nearly 50 years of precedent, it relegated the most intensely personal decision someone can make to the whims of politicians and ideologues, attacking the essential freedom of millions of Americans. Again, not true, but it's Obama, so everyone's going to listen.
I love the way that it's sort of being framed as an attack, like
it's an attack, yeah.
The delivery of states to make their own decisions is an attack on freedom.
Hillary Clinton had a comment here. Most Americans believe the decision to have a child is one of the most sacred decisions there is, and that such decisions should remain between patients and their doctors. I think it should remain between, husband and wife. Maybe that's the first layer. You should
patients
probably
and their doctors. Okay, that is the modern parental unit.
I couldn't help but be like, wait a minute, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, the patients and their okay, I understand what you're saying, but that comes off as
medical,
very,
the medical tyrannical medical industrial complex.
Yeah, I mean,
the ongoing of our species is between patients and doctors, not between
this gives too much fuel
man
to
and wife or whatever.
Yeah, this gives too much fuel to men who don't want children. The women are like, hey, we should have a child. It's like, well, it's up to
that's between you and your doctor, honey. I don't know why you're including me in this decision. That is obviously between you and your doctor.
This is a scientific decision. Wife. Let's not make it political, honey. So anyway, I just thought that was a weird thing to say, Hillary Clinton. And she ends with this. Today's Supreme Court opinion will live in infamy as a step backward for women's rights and human rights. Wow. Yeah. Really, really laying it thick there. Yep. So there you go. This is how you know that this is meant to talk about trigger. What is it called?
The talking points were ready, man. I bet most of these speeches were written months ago.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, they just went to the file, the outrage file, and they went for it. Yeah, that is funny. It's called the trigger law, and then you got all these liberals.
Yeah, because everybody's triggered.
Okay, there you go.
All right.